And we are live. Welcome YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and my favorite, LinkedIn. Welcome to another episode of the Rise and Grind Show. Black in the workplace, the hidden pressure to be twice as good for the same recognition. Listen, it's Black History Month, and I got some awesome panelists tonight, and we're going to talk about what it's like to be Black in the workplace. And once again, I am your co-host, Duncan Harrison, and I'm here with my main man, live from Qatar. Tell him who you are, brother.
Peace and major blessings to the family. This is your boy, or your man, Jay Tyler, out from Qatar. Just wishing y'all happy Black History Month. Ready to get this show started.
Yes, sir. Right. Yes, sir.
So listen, we got an excited show today. I know Duncan's got to say something, but I want to say this in reference to one of my favorite rappers, Nas, right? On his new album, he says Ultra Black. That's one of his songs, right? So we could be Ultra Black this month. We could be unapologetic, even every day. It don't have to be this month, you know what I mean? But shout out to him and that Ultra Black song. So let's turn it up today.
That's right. Yes, sir.
Yes.
Well, listen, we're gonna get right into it. You know, we want our panelists to introduce themselves to you before we get into the questions. And before we get started, if you're on Facebook, please hit the share button. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button below so you can see our next episodes coming up. So we just want to thank you. And so without further ado, I want to introduce our first panelist that's here with us today, Miss Dynell Kellyman. Please tell them who you are.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dynell Kellyman. I work with the Institute for Student Achievement, and we provide coaching support for K-12 schools. So I'm really happy to be here, y'all.
All right.
Wonderful. Yes. Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for being here with us tonight. Yes. You could have been anywhere in the world tonight, but you're here with us. So we want to thank you for that. Next, we have Miss Dee Lofton Davis. Please tell our viewers who you are.
Yes. Hello, Black family. Happy Black History Month. And I always say we're Black every single day. I'm just extra black to be black this month. I want to say hi to my New Jersey family because I'm from Jersey and we love.
Shout out to Jersey. Shout out to Jersey.
Shout out to Jersey and to the rest of the world as well. I'm a senior racial equity consultant with the federal government. Before that, I was part of law enforcement as a senior racial consultant, part of the book Walking While Black, Love is the Answer movement, Try Love, as well as working in schools. I helped train with Stanford University on anti-Black racism, as well as working with different organizations. So basically, I'm an anti-racist educator, trainer, speaker, and just love uprooting racism every chance I get.
Oh, phenomenal. Well, thank you for being with us tonight. Definitely appreciate it. And next, we have Mr. Rand Miller. Please tell them who you are.
Hello, everybody. My name is Rand Miller. I am an educator as well as a freelance writer. Currently, I am a director for a after-school and summer program located in Camden County, New Jersey for a technical school. It's through the 21st Century program. It comes through the federal government, but it is state administered through the Department of Education. And also in my spare time, I am a freelance writer. I focus on everything from education to history to politics. And the intersection of that with race. So a lot of what I talk about is some of the things that I deal with every day as a Black educator, some of the issues that Black educators go through, and sort of the mixing or intersection, if you will, with history, politics, and race. I'm a former history teacher, so let me put that out there. So, you know, I'm all about that kind of information. So just glad to be here, humbled to be with this esteemed group of panelists.
Wonderful. Well, listen, we are glad to have you tonight. We are going to get real deep tonight. So for all you scared Black folk, okay, turn the channel now if you don't want to get deep with us. But if so, if you have questions, if you have something that you would like to share, please make sure you put your comments in the comment sections, and we'll be sure to get with you. All right, so go ahead, Jay Tyler. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Because I forgot my iconic statement. I always do this at the beginning of the show. So I'm gonna do it right now before we go into it. All right.
Yes, sir.
So I always say this, before every show. So without further ado, let's do what we came here to do. You dig?
Yes, sir. Go, all right? Yes, sir. Let's get into it. Jay Tyler, I want to stop you, but we have one more esteemed panelist. Okay.
Bring her on.
And I want to bring her on.
Yes, bring her on.
Yes, sir.
Melissa, what's going on?
Melissa, how are you?
Good. How are you guys?
Yes, just when y'all thought we were done.
Yeah.
We got one more esteemed fan. Melissa, please tell the viewers who you are.
Indeed.
Hi, my name is Melissa Adiemo. I am the founder and lead producer at Ominira Studios, which is a New York-based production company and entertainment consulting firm. So, yeah, happy to be here.
Yes, glad to have you.
All right. So, Dunk, am I cleared to go ahead with my first question? We got to set it off today.
Yes, sir.
All right.
It's on you.
All right. Let's do it. This is a question that could be a short answer, a long answer. I don't know, depending on your experience. All right. So anyone can chime in on the panel as we get started. So tell us a story about being Black in the workplace. It could be your story, it could be someone else's story, but tell us a story. Let's set it off with that first before we get into the other question.
Such a loaded question in some ways. But I'm going to start with one that just rises to the top of my mind. So actually, I'm gonna do one short one. One thing about being Black in the workplace, particularly, finding your Black colleagues that you connect with and you end up like going to lunch together, you end up brainstorming together, meeting together, and how often that's called out by your white colleagues, or like all Black people hanging together, like just the magnifying glass that's constantly over you, even when you are not even thinking about it or cognizant of it, because when you're in a lunchroom full of white colleagues, you never notice that all of them are sitting at the table. It is something that's very normal. But when, being Black in the workplace and you're sitting with your colleagues that you're comfortable with, or just, having casual conversation, it's magnified. The other thing I will just mention, I distinctly remember being in a meeting one time and someone of higher leadership asked, well, who's going to take notes here? And no one volunteered because who wants to take notes, right? Like, man, I got to pack everything. I'm like, I'm going to sit this one out. So my director, who was at the time, who was a Black male, said, you know what, I'll just take notes. And she said to him, that's right, earn your keep, boy.
Oh.
And that meeting happened to be in a room full of all Black people. We didn't even notice that we were all, but everyone gave each other a look, but no one said anything. And it was like at that moment, I realized I will never be silent again. When I'm gonna call it, just as much as you made me uncomfortable, I'm gonna make you uncomfortable by calling it out.
Yeah.
All right.
I'm sorry, Dashelle, is it? Dynell? Dynell, thank you. On her point, I think many of us, Black folks, one thing that has come out of dealing with racism on a daily basis, from the time we're able to say to our mom or to our dad or both, can I go outside and play? We are experts at reading body language.
Right.
So when I go into white rooms, and I begin to speak or articulate anti-Black racism or anti-racism, or just talk and introduce myself in general, my eyes always cut to body language, and I can always tell if someone is really, engaged in the conversation or just performative. So for me, it's always a great, it's a tell sign of what type of room I'm in, because body language, we lie, humans lie. That's just a reality. But your body language will never lie. That's why your mama always caught you, because your body language never lies. You can tell your mom, oh, I didn't do it. But you're like, yeah, right. Okay, sure. So I always read the room through body language. So as a Black person, that's just a reality, at least for me.
That's right.
Thanks for sharing that. Rand, Melissa, who's next?
I'll jump in. I'll give one quick story, or not really a story, but certainly just something that I dealt with on a regular basis. When I'll put it this way: in schools, there aren't that many Black male teachers. In the United States, only less than 2% of all teachers are Black male. Less than 7% of all teachers are Black. Whenever you are in a school where there are a majority of Black and Afro Latinx kids, and you're a Black male teacher, it's like, oh man, we got somebody here. We got something here. So I've been approached so many times about, can you come and deal with these kids? Right? Like, do you know how to speak to these kids? Do you know what? You're great at reaching them. Can you come in my class and like kind of deal with them? Because I don't really know how to deal with them. And so there's always this idea that because I'm Black, it's like, who had the skit? Somebody had a skit where they talked about the magical Negro. Right, it's like
Key and Peele. Yes,
yeah,
sir.
Key and Peele had it, and there was
Right.
another sketch show that's on Netflix. They did the magical Negro rehab. Like, they look at you as the magical Negro who can work with Black kids to discipline them, but not necessarily to teach them. We don't want you teaching them anything per se, just what we give you to teach, but we need you to corral them. And as a Black man in education, I have instances on top of instances where it's like, yeah, we'll give you to the Black guy because he knows how to deal with you, and then when he corrals you up, then we'll take him back and we'll give him that good Eurocentric education.
Got it.
Right.
So two examples come to mind when I think about being Black in the workplace. One isn't really an example, but it is, I would say it is a symptom of the kind of systemic racism that happens within like corporations and companies. And I find that it's that feeling of competition where it's only like you feel like you're in a game of Highlander where there can be only one. And I feel like that pitting against each other that happens. And it's not even us doing it so much as it's the environment making us, because it's so unsafe, we feel like in order to keep it and therefore our livelihood, we have to perform in ways that attack each other. So that's one. That's like something that I have experienced. I actually experience it more now as an independent producer than I have in recent years. Like, so actually, no, that's not true. I would say that as an independent producer, I see it more now because I work with different cultures. So like, I find that like because I'm working with Black people literally globally. So like my experience with Black Brazilians is going to be very different from my experience with Black Brits. It's going to be very different from my experience with Nigerians born and bred, which is very different from my experience with African Americans. I feel like African Americans right now, we're in this place of community, especially in the media and entertainment business, where it's head nods, it's what's up, it's I got you, sis. It's really, really, really truly supporting each other. And in other places, it ain't like that. So that's one thing I'll say. And then a specific instance I'll talk about is when I was coming up at a major media organization. I'll keep the name out of the dialogue. I remember specifically that this organization, it was kind of a well-known thing that if you were starting out as manager level and below, it would take you twice as long to get to the next level as your counterparts. Sometimes times as long. So if you're starting out as an assistant, doesn't matter your education level, doesn't matter doesn't matter your education level, doesn't matter how hard you're working, doesn't matter who and all the people you know. And I know that for a fact because I went through that while there. I was like literally high performing assistant coordinator. I was not getting promoted or moved into a certain other positions at a higher level. And I'd worked, traditionally you'd work in an assistant or coordinator position for about 2 years before transitioning to another role. And if you don't transition to another role within the group or at the company, you transition out. That was like the thing. I tried so hard to transition out into other parts of the company and it didn't happen. And I saw, it wasn't until I talked to another more established assistant who was just like, she was like, listen, girl, I don't know how to tell you this, but just because you went to Columbia does not mean that you are going to progress at the rate that you think you should be for somebody who is as smart as you and as educated as you. First off, a lot of these people are intimidated by that. Secondly, there is, if you haven't realized, like most of us, it takes us twice as long. And I'm telling you, there would be people who literally had less experience, let's just say less experience than I did, would come in, be at a place for a year and a half, and then get moved up, and then get moved up again. And I would see it so much, it actually became truly discouraging. And I'm talking about, I was connected to like the global SVP of HR and all these other people, like really pulling on my behalf, and wasn't getting promoted. Or being able to transition into other departments at a higher level. So that was something where I was like, it was both shocking, but it brought the statistics into reality for me.
Wow. That's crazy. And I think we see that, and I don't want to say we see it all the time, but we definitely see it. And I think it's becoming more prevalent, with corporate America, especially shifting and then hiring, DE&I, individuals by the boatload, shall we say. But I definitely want to share one story. When I was a college student at the Delaware State University in Dover, Delaware, proud HBCU, Delaware State University Hornet. I worked, and I'll say the name of the company because if they haven't hired somebody for diversity, equity, and inclusion, they need to. So I worked for Boscow's in the loss prevention department. I was a criminal, sociology with a focus on criminal justice major. So I was in the loss prevention department, and it was the loss prevention department was 4 of us, 1 black male, which was myself, and 3 other white men. And I remember coming in one day. And my supervisor, the gentleman who actually hired me, he was sitting down looking at the camera, and he said, hey, Duncan, come here. Look, these 2 girls are getting ready to steal. And so I went down, and we had, lots of cameras, different focuses, and the 2 girls were over there by the earrings. And so I looked, it was 2 young black females. And I said, well, how do you know that they're getting ready to steal? He said, because the one girl is signaling the other. She keeps doing this. Now, if you know anything about black women, you know that this is not a signal to steal. Nope. This is my head is itching crazy. I'm not going to mess this up, and I'm going to pat this down, right? But for him, being a white male that knew probably nothing outside of his culture, all he saw was, 2 young black females by the earrings doing something that was not of norm to him. So they must be getting ready to steal. And I think that, one, that was a signal for me that, I wanted to get more on the policy side than actually be on the law enforcement side to affect change. But also, this was probably about 10 years ago. So, it just showed how much that was needed back then, compared to now. Right. And so what I want to do is, Diana.
I don't have a story.
Oh, I'm sorry. I
can't go into my story.
I didn't know if they had stories in Qatar. I'm sorry.
I'm also born and bred American, so I definitely got some stories for sure. Now I'll keep it short though. So basically, I worked at a place in an environment where there's this real sharp sister, that was an assistant principal. Sharp, like she had all the tools to be the principal. But there was another principal who, let's just say, he had bad management techniques with his staff, right? Things that he shouldn't been doing as a leader. And so therefore, I remember having a conversation with her one day. She said, Just, I'm leaving. I said, okay. Why are you leaving? She said, I've been doing everything right. I get to work on time, early. I stay late. I do everything right by the kids. My performance is excellent, above par. But the guy, that's in front of me, he's the one that doesn't do everything by the book, doesn't do everything, but his skin color allows him to have more of an extension in his professionalism, more of an extension to keep his job. So all the things that he does gets looked at not as deeply as something that I would do. And therefore, he's still employed and empowered, in his position. And so it's like, I can't stand for that organization like that. Can't be involved waiting around for them to still keep someone like that in front of me. So I remember her leaving, and so that was an experience a while ago that I had, but it just made me feel like, wow, she's a Black woman who's doing what she's supposed to do. But I just feared that they didn't want to hear her voice. They thought that she was too opinionated, too educated, so they rather deal with the other guy that they can control and they know, even though he has some very extreme situations that even an HR person would say you have to fire him, but they did not. Maybe because of the color of his skin, right? Afforded him that opportunity. So that's just something that I saw, and I felt bad for the sister, and that's why she left the organization. So,
definitely.
Mm-hmm.
So we do have a question. I think we have about 2 questions for our viewers to the panelists, and so I wanted to pull this one question up. It's from Diana McNeil Brown.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever been dubbed as the angry Black person? And if so, how did you handle it?
It's a great question.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I can't say I was actually called an angry Black person. I remember working in logistics as an HR manager.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the employees came in because his manager was treating him, in his eyes, unfairly.
Mm-hmm.
His manager was white and the employee was Black. And it wasn't just that one employee. There was 3 shifts. And me being in the HR department, I would hear, of course, and I would read different documents to this manager. And I brought it up to the attention of the executive and said, this manager is a problem because we have more than one Black and brown person complaining about basically being racially targeted, getting the worst hours, saying things under his breath that were barely inaudible, but enough to know that that was towards a racial slur. So he was slick in that sense. And then, of course, management had a talk with him, executive management had a talk with him and put him through sensitivity training. And from that, point, I was not dubbed the angry Black HR woman, but the woman, that had basically an issue with white managers. And I addressed it, when someone would bring that to my attention. I said, I don't have an issue with white managers. I have an issue with racism. And all, and all.
Right.
And and I like forgive me, I have my glasses on. I don't know, your first name is Nessa, is it, or Lisa? I apologize. I don't have my glasses on right now. But I like her point, speaking to inner minority racism. We think that racism is just one color. No, it's multi. People say, is inner minority racism a thing? It is.
Yeah.
And it's like crabs in a barrel. So even when you get to, a certain role, a senior role, sometimes in a corporation, not only are you dealing with racism from white supremacy and colonialism, but you're dealing with racism, inner minority racism, and toxic competition, racial competition, I'm an educator, from your own, Black brothers and sisters. Because like you said, I have to be the only one. No, you don't. And an interesting study came out. I wish I can remember who did this study. I want to say McKinsey, but I could be wrong. Don't catch me in a lie. But it was a study that Black female entrepreneurship 2 years ago was up over 400%. Because of all the hoops we had to jump through to get to the role. When we got there, it wasn't the promised land. It was, it was basically just tokenized or just more issues. The company looked good, but we couldn't sleep at night. So there was an exodus for many Black women out of the C-suite in corporate America, which now they're trying to bring us back in. So, I always say, if you're finding yourself dreading going to work, you might want to start researching what you're really gifted at, because I believe where your passion is, there's profit. And, we do so much research on a company we're going to go to. Why not research your gifts, your talents, and then find out how to monetize that.
Right.
Because life is short. So, build your dream instead of someone else's, if you find that happening over and over again.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Melissa.
I was just going to say that I 100% agree with Dee Dee, because I think that we will sit in jobs and opportunities that aren't serving us for the sake of that job and that label and that title, rather than, listen, I treat these jobs like men. I'm gonna be real with you. Like, if you aren't serving my greater needs, there is no reason to stay in a relationship with you. And greater needs, as in, am I getting that check? Are you giving me a sense of peace when I go to work? Because we all have a purpose, right? And so I am very lucky in that when I go to work, I feel like I am fulfilling that purpose. But even within that purpose, there needs to be a sense of peace, right? And that sense of peace comes from not only the work, but who I'm doing that work with. And then the other thing is, are you giving me clout? Like, are you helping build my brand and or reputation? Right. Because there has to be, when you think about a relationship, obviously there are other reasons for why you're in any particular relationship, whether it be familial, romantic, whatever. But when you're thinking about work, and this is me in terms of producing, it really has to meet like 3 or 4, maybe 5 goals outside of the check, the respect, right, and the sense of peace and purpose. I put those 2 together just because, especially in producing, you can easily lose the peace in going after the purpose. And I've learned that, like, it is not worth it. It's not worth the psychology bills, all that other stuff. But to Dee Dee's point, I think that I have been around so many people who will, and I have also been that person for so many years, of somebody who will stay in something because of how it looks to other people, while it is literally physically and mentally making me sick. And that is part of the reason why COVID hit so many of us. That's the reason why so many of us, as Black people in particular within America, but maybe even outside of it, that's why so many of us are having health issues, because the psychological aspects of our work and the day in, day out, like, racism and battles that we have to face is too much. You getting paid 2/3 to the dollar, and you got to deal with like microaggressions and or overaggressions. Really? Right. How? How am I supposed to do that, Sway?
It's exhausting. It is exhausting.
Yeah.
And by the way, I'm not good enough to be exhausted every single day at a job that I don't believe I should be at in the first place, and I'm actually devalue that. So yes.
Yeah. And I think people are more sophisticated now to not call it, right, angry Black person, right? They're being passive aggressive now. They're using language like, you're too emotional, right? I see that you're passionate, but your passion is coming through too much, right? Like, they're not saying.
My favorite is, you are unsophisticated. I love it.
One. That's
like, right? They question your professionalism.
This degree and this MBA. What is unsophisticated about me?
Right. Right.
Let's find out. Let us discover.
Right, because your Ivy League education did not describe your sophistication. Apparently, that wasn't sophisticated. Like, so then you get into these work settings, right, where they don't use words like you're the angry Black person, but they're using all of this like passive aggressive language that you know what it means, and it's angering you. Like, right, like you physically are feeling like what they're saying, and you want to call them out on it. So it's like this, but you're trying to be professional, and you're trying not to lean into what they are calling you or what they are labeling you. Right. So it's that passive aggressive. I think that is worse, right, in some ways, than being actually called out. Because when I'm called out, I can deal with what you said, right? But this passive aggressive language, you can tell me what you did. And I don't want to have the conversation about, no, I didn't say you were angry. I just said you were emotional. Like, I know what you mean by that. And so it is, I think it's the navigation around the jargon and the language that corporate America is using, right, to like be able to like oppress and suppress. That's the real hurdle.
It's true. Before I left corporate America and started my own business, one of the lines I always heard was, Dee Dee, don't rock the boat. I'm like, I'm from New Jersey. I'm going to turn this doggone thing over. All right. Because we are slowly dying in this boat because of the racism we are facing. So why do this? And then, of course, now with everyone having this, or most corporations having this racial reckoning and awareness, I'm the first one to say, don't give me your Black Lives Matter statement if you're enabling racists to supervise your Black employees. I don't want to hear that. I don't want to see that, because I'm going to call you out on that. Social media, I always kind of say that it's like another underground railroad for Black people, because we find connections, we find business, we find basically how to get around this racist structure. And so when companies go on social media and say, yes, Black Lives Matter, and then next thing you know, they have somebody in blackface on social media and they're like a senior executive, no, that's not going to fly. So, yeah.
Definitely. And I guess what I'm thinking about this is that we all kind of also expect this to happen too. It's not just like we walk in and, oh my goodness, why is this happening? We actually expect it to happen. So that's the more telling part, actually. And that's sometimes that we don't, we go in there already with expectations. So that's kind of like something that's been happening for a long time. Rand, I want to hear what you have to say as well within this topic. So jump in on that one.
So I would probably argue that for me as a man, I didn't necessarily get that angry tag. I know that I've seen in my experiences in education, Black women leaders get that tag heavily. And so there's this dance that I've seen them play where it's like, no, I'm not going to fall trap to what you're going to put on me. Right. And so I'm very careful as to how I step. And I've actually just learned a lot from a number of the Black women leaders that I've come across in education, because they do it damn well. I'll say this. I think that what we often have to remember is that these corporations, these schools, these institutions, they're white institutional spaces. So whiteness is the default. Whiteness sets the tone. Whiteness sets the policies and the procedures, and it's in the underbelly of the corporation or the organization or the system. And so while we may have spaces of representation, and that's why the issue with DEI is a good thing to talk about, we may be in positions, but that doesn't mean that we had anything to do with, the fabric of the organization, developing the organization, putting the rules in place, putting the default folkways and norms in place, right? And so we have to navigate that. And to Dee Dee's point, the reality is that we understand that these spaces aren't for us. And so we oftentimes have to leave. Now, the problem for someone, I don't want to say a problem, but one of the challenges for someone like me in education is I can leave. And I've had that discussion with them myself plenty of times. But then for me, it's like, okay, but these fools are still here with these Black and brown kids, and you're often the only person here for them. And so there's always that tension. And then and I would also say this. I think that Donnell made a great point. This idea of folks saying, oh, you're so emotional. And Black people, you're just so emotional. And what I've learned is that, you have to, in a way, intellectualize the argument, because, let's be honest, a lot of white people that I've dealt with are very much intellectual and see me as emotional as a Black person. And so you just have to learn. And that's what we talk about, the code switching thing. You have to learn the language. You have to learn to talk the language. And I don't say that to say that we need to capitulate at all. But what I'm saying is again, navigating, switching in order for you to have, what Melissa talked about. When you're in this relationship, sometimes you're going to be in a relationship that you just feel like you have to be in for a moment, because sometimes that just happens. And so you have to figure it out. You have to work it out. And like I said, I think that there's a lot that goes into it, but we just have to remember that we're in these spaces. These aren't our spaces. And if we can, if in the possibility, we have to carve out our own spaces like DD has done, or we have to, jump in the door, kick in the door, like, Melissa did, was say, hey, look, this is what it is. And that's it. point blank. It ain't nothing else. And it's so, you know, but that comes again with the seasoning. And one last point, because I don't want to ramble on. I forget whether it was DD, I think it might have been DD, made a great point. We often do this to each other as well. We don't.
And Danielle mentioned it too.
Danielle mentioned it too. Okay. We don't support each other in these spaces, and we have to absolutely do that. And Danielle made the great point. Oftentimes when we come together in an organization, it's like, oh my gosh, all the Black people are together. And there might have been 2 or 3 of us in the hallway. But we have to be that support for one another, because we understand that these spaces aren't for us. And if we're going to succumb to that atmosphere, that sort of Protestant ethic, Eurocentric way of dealing with one another, when we are actually a communal people, where we are a people that is built on a community tradition, then we're going to fall prey every time.
So Rand, I want to, definitely jump in on something that you said that actually leads into our next question. You mentioned the dexterity of code switching. All right. So I want to ask the panel this question in general. And Duncan, I think you have something else that we can also play involving code switching. But
and so actually, let me before you ask the question, for the people that don't know what code switching is, let me just play this short clip so you can kind of get an example of what code switching looks like in its setting.
Hola, amiguita. Hola, amiguita, ¿cómo estás? Qué chula te veo. Te veo. Oh, hey. How you doing? I'm better now. Oh, hey, Black Queen. Hey, Black Queen. How you doing, girl? Get popping. ¿Qué lo que, Gabriel? Tú sabes, aquí, tranquilo, quieto. Tú sabes. Oh, good morning. Hey. How are you? I'm good. How are you? I'm great. Good. How was your weekend? It was good. How was yours? I was good. I was good. I went hiking. Oh, that's fun. Yeah. Have a good one. You too.
Classic example.
Well, listen, that's a great example. And so that actually gives more of a beef to the sandwich, right, that I'm about to ask. So, the panelists, do you believe in code switching? And do you think it's necessary and important in the workplace?
I was talking off camera before we got on camera, and I was saying, I'm from New Jersey. We don't know how to code switch. We're just really rawly real, for the most part. We can't hide our body language, so it's kind of hard. Our face will always tell us off. But I do get it. And yes, there are times in my younger, I'd say 20s, when I first got my first corporate job, I thought I had to code switch, and I realized the racism that was in my face every single day. I stopped code switching and I started taking names.
I would probably say this. I think that, and not to jump ahead to another question, but there is always this idea that we have to perform in white spaces, and that we have to be different, and that we have to code switch. And it's sort of the lesson that I was taught as a kid. My wife was taught as a kid, and we're not really going about teaching that to our kids. We want them to be their authentic selves.
Right.
Now, here's what I will say. I'm not going to greet someone that I'm not friends with or familiar with in a way that I wouldn't with someone that I'm not, if that makes sense. So like in the example, I'm gonna show love to my people. If that's my people, that's my people. But if I'm not, I might not do that. And I'm gonna be honest with you. The reality is this: if I see a brother in the street, we gonna get the nod. That's just gonna happen. It's gonna be the nod. If I see a white guy in the street, I'm not gonna necessarily do that. Because the nod means something in the Black community. If I see my brother and I might know him in passing, I might not even chill with him or bang with him like that. I might still give him that. Ain't no might. We still gonna give that off the strength, because that means something in our community. So I think that it's not about code switching for the benefit of white folks. I think what it's about is a sense of community and unity amongst Black folk. That's important. That matters much more. And I know that can be seen as code switching, but I often think that that's just a matter of, hey, I'm with my people, and understanding the apparatus of racism and white supremacy in this country, that being the social order. I'm going to show love to my people, and I'm not necessarily going to do that with anybody that I'm not connected to.
I think it's just more acceptable, right? Like, before, if you weren't code switching, you were deemed unprofessional, right? Like in these corporate spaces. And so now people are embracing, socially emotional learning and like being yourself. And now they're recognizing like, oh, people come to work with their whole selves. They can't check the fact that they're struggling at home at the door automatically, right? When they sit in your chair, they're sitting in your chair whole. And I think, once we started taking it back, like, no, I'm not going to act the way you think I should act, right? Because it makes you comfortable. And we started to take back our own language, the way we want to interact, the way we want to get our point across, because I'm using hand gestures I'm not trying to like scare anyone. I just use hand gestures when I talk. And so all of those things, and I think also coming from an HBCU, I went to Hampton. So boy, he was big enough Dell State. I went to Hampton, but that was like actually reinforced at Hampton too. Like, oh no, you have to, you can't wear your hair a certain way. It's like we were reinforcing that at HBCUs, right? And like my prayer is that we will stop doing that, right? Like stop telling people how to wear their hair, how to conform to whiteness, period. But like we'll start embracing it for ourselves so that we can bring our whole selves.
I think a level of, so I struggle with this. I literally think about this quite often. Like, how much of myself should I be bringing to every space? I think there's a level of like yourself you have to keep in all relationships. And that's not about code switching. That's just maintaining certain level of boundaries. Right. And like, I think the funny thing is, to Dee Dee's point, I also am from Jersey. So, we will share all the feelings up front and center. And then I'm Nigerian. So those feelings will be shared and loud. And just like, and what? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, and recently, as I continue to kind of grow in my career, I am trying to figure out what that balance is of which Melissa am I going to share with you. I don't even think of it as code switching as so much as I think of it as there are different aspects of myself that you get and or earn. Like the fully realized Black version, Africanist version of Melissa, that is if I fuck with you. Like, and or if I have a goal in mind in that specific space and time that needs to get met, not just for myself, but for those behind me. Right? But if I don't fuck with you and this is a transactional relationship, yeah, you might just get like, me being funny. And I often lean into the funny version of myself, where I'm just being like, hey, da, 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 because it's easy to remember. You remember that you laughed and you liked me, and we can move on. Everybody can like live their best lives, right? But I think that like, I think of it more as a thing of like, which version am I going to give you? And I do think that giving you a version is necessary. Now that version has nothing to do with me perming or straightening my hair, unless you're going to pay me to not only do it, but then pay me to continue to wear it for the time that I spend with you. I ain't changing my hair. So you're just going to have to catch a grip. Like, or, any of the other ways in which we are supposed to communicate effectively with white people. Like, I'm not going to do those things. The way I talk and the degrees I have should be enough for you. And what I have to offer in conversation because of that education, and outside of it should be enough for you. But I do think that, like, I think often about the versions in which I'm going to give you and when and why. And I do think that that's not so much about whiteness or the representation of my blackness so much as it's about me maintaining a level of boundaries with the people I engage with. Because again, if you're not giving me at least two of those three things that I mentioned earlier, then you shouldn't be getting the fullness of me. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Can I jump in real fast?
Yeah, man.
I just want to say this here. And I think Melissa made a great point earlier. You do have to protect your peace. My wife says that often. You do have to protect your peace. And one of the brothers in the comments, my brother Kyrie, he was just like, blackness is still fetishized. And that's absolutely true. And so, you know, we just have to be careful and do a self-check. Because, you know, sometimes we may not even realize it, but, you know, folks, and I wrote an article about this, folks do this verbal blackface thing where they feel like they have to act a certain way. If we come off a certain way, or just by our sheer presence, that they have to do a certain thing and be a certain way with us. And that's not necessarily true. Or they think that they know us and can anticipate how we're going to act off the strength of just what we look like and how we come to the table. Our degrees, our expertise, our know-how, what you hired us to do should be enough, but it never is. And so you do have to protect your peace. Everybody can't handle the full, you know, black me. I know that. It is what it is. I'm not trying to give all that off. I might scare somebody, but that's okay. You have to protect that. Everybody can't handle that. The same way everybody can't hear your dreams. Everybody can't hear your passions. Everybody can't, they're not for everybody's ears. And our blackness isn't for everybody's consumption either.
That's right.
The reason why I love the field of anti-racism, because what we're speaking to basically is what diversity and inclusion has had 50 years to basically dissect and disaggregate and then, you know, teach and educate. And I always say where diversity and inclusion leaves off, anti-racism has always been there to say this is how you speak to our community and make it better. Like when it comes to equality, you know, and equity, like what's the difference? You know, equality basically is a diversity and inclusion talking point. We're all equal. You know, there needs to be fairness. And anti-racism says, okay, thank you for that. Appreciate it. But hold up. You know, we all have different needs as well. If you're not speaking to racial equity, because the biggest problem between equality and getting that equity is racism, anti-Black racism, Black and brown racism, minority racism, internalized racism, which, you know, is not often met in C-suite. So just knowing the difference between equity, equality, and equity. So when you're asking, you know, I don't code switch anymore. Great, you taught me that, but I'm still not getting as much as you're getting. I'm doing the same job. I'm not getting the same pay. That's equity. We fill in those gaps.
Right.
Equality says you don't have to code switch anymore. Great, but still, Black women are making, like Melissa said, 2/3 less on the dollar than white women. Now, Asian women have, economically, has passed white women. Economically, the white acceptance, you know, came, you know, through tech and through STEM and through the model myth minority. So that once again, Black and brown people, because of the color of our skin, we're not seen as valued as someone who has lighter skin. Just knowing, you know, and researching basically your power. President Biden, thank you that he is in office, because the last administration, I can't even say his name, was unapologetically racist. And those who are viewing, please just Google research President Biden's racial equity plan, because it's bringing corporations to government saying this is what's going to happen moving forward in the next 4 years. You're going to have to meet racial equity where it is. You're going to have to do this because we're putting it into policy. We're putting it into law. We're going to meet those disparities, those pay disparities, healthcare disparities, home ownership disparities, and NAACP and Color for Change and Black Lives Matter and other, you know, civil rights groups are getting behind it as well. So, in this day of racial, and I'm passionate because it's my work and education, but in this day of racial reckoning, take your power back. Civil rights, thank you for my grandparents and my mother, who took us, up to halfway to the finish line. Anti-racism, we're like, let's go. Let's do this. We have government now saying, we want to hear from you. Go to the, government website and tell them exactly what you want so they can put it into policy. Call your senators, call your Congress. You voted, you showed out, you represented. But again, 2 years from now, it can all be unraveled. So invest in your knowledge of government, because that affects our everyday lives. National elections are great, but it's the local ones that changes for the better Black people's lives. Thank God for Stacey Abrams. She went like one person at a time. Community is everything. That's how we get our power that we never had. That's how we get what Dr. King referred to, that promissory note that America has yet to fill. Economic power. Vote, research, invest in yourself, invest in our community, and get our power back. Our power we never had in the first place, I should say.
So I want to switch to a question from the viewers, and this is from Kayla Miata Samsel. Hope I'm saying that right. Sometimes I can be known to butcher names.
Yeah, that was brave. That was brave. I wasn't going to say the name.
I was ready. I was ready for the smoke. I thought I had a hold on it. You know what I'm saying?
Hell yes.
I want to mention a little short story before I get into Kayla's question. So when you look at this question, I had a conversation with one of my best friends, and I know there was a lot going on last year with the administration, previous administration, and as it pertained to us as people and then his people. And I got to a point when, people said, well, I want you to speak out on this, on social media or whatever. I said, I'm not in a position anymore, or I don't feel like it's necessary for me to explain, Blackness to someone anymore. We already know what's going on. I don't need to go over this once over. And so I think my friend was wanting me to educate and be in a position to educate more, but I just kind of felt that it wasn't necessary. But Dunk, if you could put that question back up again, because it kind of pertains to what Kayla is saying. So she said, I just often wonder why we are the only ones in the room having this conversation as if we're not aware. How do you all think we should engage in conversation with those that are blind to these topics, or should even be a conversation? What do y'all think?
I would love to tackle this first, because I think that I literally was just in a room right before this, where I have a friend who just got into tech, and she was talking about how to make tech essentially more diverse and why it isn't. And I'm not coming from tech, but the conversation related to something that I'm thinking about in my business, which is why I joined. Anyway, I got on and I was just like, listen, I think the psychological hardship and trauma of having to come into an organization that is mainly white and deal with the microaggressions at said organization has made me tired. Your Apple, Google, Facebook, and everybody in between or below. At least the first ones I mentioned are $1 trillion companies, which means they have resources, which means they have money. You telling me you can't find as many problems as you've solved in that company and are continuing to solve, you can't figure out how to have more Black and Hispanic people in your office? Stop it. At some point, this is even maybe 2-3 years ago, I was like, we got to get in there. We got to figure out how to make them listen. I don't care if you listen. I no longer care. I care about my love language is policies. What are the rules you're putting in place so that your ass, like when your ass fuck up, the other person behind you don't fuck up. And so that I don't have to, so the people behind me don't inherit this fuck shit. That's really what I'm looking for from any company, any government. What are your policies that help to fight and or deter what has become human nature? 400, 500 years ago, a lie was told. A lie was told about Black people so that people could justify slavery. That lie has been fed to white people in terms of their own superiority and to Black people to maintain our inferiority. And that's globally, right? Don't tell me it's about America. Like, to be honest, there's a lot more that Americans are getting than our brothers in the UK and France. And that's just some of the places. I'm not talking about Italy or Spain where they're not even having conversations. They're not even. So I say all this to say that for me at this point in my life and career, because I, like you, Justin, have been the person talking, fighting, having the battle. I still have the battles on Facebook. I'm sure if you follow me, I'll be out here like swatting down white people like I'm like a dragon slayer over here. Just like, you're racist. You're racist. You're racist. Like, I'm tired. Especially since nobody's paying me for that, right? But to answer, I don't know. Oh, Kalia's question. I fundamentally think that, yes, have the conversation, be part of the organizations that are having those conversations at your work with other people that aren't Black, right? Like where it's like, okay, yes, Black people are invested in this, Hispanic people are invested in this, other people who are other than white men are invested in this. So let's have this conversation, but ensure that those organizations are tied into HR. So HR is making sure that it's not a self-serving room or circle jerk where it's like we all talking together, where it's really outwardly facing. And that outwardly facing is to other employees and it's to the higher up organization. Now, how to choose those organizations or even how to create those organizations, that's something you're going to have to find out how to do yourself. But I think the other thing that we need to consider in terms of Kalia's question, because it is a good question, is also like going back to what Rand said and what Rand's wife really says is protect your peace.
Yeah.
This work is hard work. DE&I work, whether it is your job like Dee or not, is difficult fucking work. I've been doing it for years. That's why you got me in this I don't give a fuck state. I'm 38 years old. I can honestly tell you, and you know this, Justin, I was doing this shit in high school. I was the first Black, like, hey, I'm the only prefect here. Like, you know.
that was a code switch right there, people. Did y'all see that? She just code switched for
that just happened.
That code switch just happened.
But that was part of my, like, you getting my whole full Blackness. So that was ensconced in, I fuck with y'all, so I'm telling you the truth.
And Melissa, I want to jump in because you know, obviously we went to school together, right? And so this was something that I think we all experienced before we even went into the workplace.
Yeah.
Right. So one of my good friends, he just put it in the comments before. We laugh at the rich cats when they leave, we switch back. That's a Nas quote. And we always used to say that because that was our first really dalliance with, you know, the greater America, if you will. Right. It's like, oh, I didn't even know we had to do this. So we found our code switching voice in high school.
Yep.
Right. Being the one of I don't know how many of us were there, but it was a very small minority of people of color. Right. And so we found that out before we even entered the workplace. So we already saw the game as a little microcosm to what the macro was at the same time. So just wanted to jump in and say that, Melissa. So
also, Colleen, I believe I wanted to encourage you. You might, if you might want to do some research, and you might be able to, if you're passionate enough about it, study up on educating, anti-racism education. I made a career out of it. Not just that, I know I have a friend, when I say a friend, I know professionally, who basically educates corporations through a newsletter daily. She turned, the questions of, how do Black people feel about, and then fill in the blanks to a newsletter. And now she's making over 6 figures just by writing something. Answering it, but monetizing it. So, use that, as another economics, a stepping ladder to where, you believe your dream is. So do the research. And if that's something that, that because you asked the question, so I'm wondering if that's a passion of yours, that you're tired of educating, but do you want to make money educating, whether through a newsletter, whether through studying up on anti-racism education, I appreciate DE&I, but I'm not a DEI practitioner. I'm anti-racist, intentionally anti-racist educator, and have been that way because of all of the gaps in DEI. I appreciate the work, but there's too many racial gaps. Just finding your voice and your power. And doing something as simple as, talking to your community about it. Hey, listen, I'm starting up this paper. Would you buy it, for $1? Before you know it, we might have 10 people buying like your little newsletter, like daily news letter, per day,
Right.
And add it up in a month. And they're going to tell their friends, so you might want to look at that as well.
Yeah. I also think that you just have to check and Melissa said it earlier, you just really have to check where you are emotionally. Sometimes I cannot educate. I just cannot educate. I cannot be in the education state. Just cannot do it. And I'll give you an example. When George Floyd murder happened, I was at a company. I won't say which company. I was at a company, and we were having what was titled a courageous conversation. And I just could not understand what was courageous about a murder. What was courageous in this conversation? And literally, I am on a team meeting, and I am crying. I just was not in this space to be on anybody's meeting, to be at anybody's workplace. Right. And I was angry for being exposed in a way that I wasn't ready for, and I didn't check where I was. Where am I? I don't feel like giving you access, which Melissa talked about earlier too. I don't feel like giving you access to this part of me right now. This right here is reserved for my friends, for my family, as we're trying to talk through this and process this, right? We're having these conversations, and now work, right? Everybody came out with their statements, right? And now work is trying to rise us up, or this is so important. Can you speak about this? It's no, I cannot. I cannot. But I do think it's important. I do think the conversation should be had. I'm just not the person to do it. So you have to know, Kayla, where you are in this space. Where are you emotionally? Where are you in terms of being able to educate? Because it's exhausting work, but it's necessary work.
I don't want to be your go-to Black person when stuff happens to Black people. That's just not what I want to be.
Especially when you could have come to me before the world was
right. Exactly. That's exactly it.
I was talking about that shit before George Floyd. You do realize there were other people who died and were killed unfairly by the police, right?
Yep.
You just stuck at home in COVID. That's why you're talking about George Floyd to me. Man, if you don't
She just went into the angry Black woman phase. You went from code switching to angry Black woman.
Again,
but
the fullness of my Blackness.
There you go.
That's right.
I don't want to be that person. That like Donnell said, it's exhausting. It's tiring. Don't come to me when this happens to the Black person. I'm not your guy.
It's definitely a calling. And again, you need to check, where you are and who you are. For me, it's a calling for me. So I love it. Plus, I'm making a living at it. But you're right. It has to be something that you're either passionate about or it has called you. If it hasn't, then you're not going to be very happy.
Yeah.
So
you're going to be
I have a question. I think I don't want to be the person that puts more fuel on the fire, but this is a question that I have to ask, right? Because we do have the esteemed panelists here. Can a white person be a diversity expert?
Oh, you know what? Diversity, yes. Anti-racism, I have a caveat. Because diversity is not just racial. It's, it goes from LGBTQ, it goes to military, it intersects with so many different communities. So diversity, yes. Anti-racism, I'll use Robin DiAngelo as, a point of, example. White lady with her book, White Fragility. It's been, published that she makes over, $20,000 to $40,000 per speaking gig, talking about our problems, how racism affects us.
Right.
And once again, profiting off the backs and stories of Black men and women and children. So I say, if you're going to be an anti-racist educator and you're not Black or brown, sure, if you want to go for it, but you might want to, prepare yourself for the pushback. Because right now, when other books came out and and publishings came out about what she was making, that really, I think, affected, her appeal to many people. When it came to, oh, you're making this much? And here, we're anti-racist educators, and that's not even something we're not even in the room for. So DEI, yes, all day, anybody, purple squirrel, be DEI, educator. But anti-racism, it's very specific to Black and brown people of color. And if you want, do it if you feel that's your passion, but don't be surprised if there's pushback.
Donnell, what do you think? I want to hear your opinion on this actual question as well.
I would like defer to Dr. Bettina Love on this. She does the Abolitionist Teaching Network. I heard her speak one time, like it blew me. She talked about the difference between an ally and a co-conspirator, right? And she said, see, the ally, they read the research report before you read the report, right? They're like, did you see that? And you're like, no, I was too busy being Black. I ain't see that report yet, right? But she said that the co-conspirator, right, is the one that is going to not be in the forefront, right? But is going to be that support that you need to like move things along, right? Because you're going to need that, especially if you're trying to infiltrate white networks, right? You can't just do it all by yourself. So you're going to need that that co-conspirator to come with you. And she gave the example of the young woman that climbed the pole to take down the Confederate flag in North Carolina, right? She climbed the pole.
South Carolina.
I knew it was one of the Carolinas.
Bree Newsom.
Thank you. Do you know the gentleman that was with her, with Bree? I don't remember his name. It was a white gentleman. See, I don't remember his name, but everybody knows Bree Newsom. But what happened was, and she told this story, Dr. Bettina Love told this story, that they were in the IHOP. It was a planned event, right? They were in the IHOP planning to do this. When they got the signal to say go, Bree Newsom did her job. She climbed that pole. Well, the police was like, oh, I know how to get her down. I'm just going to tase the pole. That'll get her down. I'm going to tase the pole. And the white gentleman that was with her, that was the co-conspirator, touched the pole. And he knew that the white cop will not tase that pole if he was touching the pole. And so what I see is that what we expect from our white colleagues is to touch the pole and allow Bree Newsom to be Bree Newsoms.
Yep.
That's interesting.
I mean, I was just going to say there. To that point, if you want to like look at non-Black, non-brown, anti-racist, or folks dealing with that, that's cool. But I would just defer to all the many Black and brown folks that's writing on this stuff, that's doing this work. Donnell mentioned Bree Newsom. If you follow her on Twitter, she giving the real every day. My alma mater, Rutgers University, Brittany Cooper, she doing the work. Bettina Love mentioned, she's doing the work. Crystal Fleming doing the work. So, I mean, it's plenty of Black and brown people who is talking about this, who can give you the real from the perspective of living it. And this ain't the shade, the Tim Wises and Robin DeAngelo's of the world, but it is what it is, right? So I would suggest for not anyone here in particular in the panel, but I'm talking about folks that's like, oh, I discovered I'm white and I need to figure out what to do. Those people, I would suggest that they look at Black people, Black voices, Indigenous voices, Afro Latinx voices, in all spectrums, the LGBTQ community as well, Black voices from there, and to get that real information, to get that raw, because you're not necessarily going to get it from anywhere else. Not to say that people can't try to do like DD said, but I would just caution people to go find the real.
Because you're going to feel fire from the Black and brown community. And if you're not built for it, you're going to get your feelings hurt every single time.
Right. That's right.
So I have a question too about, I guess, our age differences in generation. Do Black millennials face the same workplace challenges as previous generations? Right? Because we've been Black forever, right? But is our struggle as Black millennials different than previous generations? Are we still dealing with the same struggles?
Still dealing with the same struggles. I mean, it's wearing different pants. They're tighter. That's it. Like they might use the language evolves, right? So they might use different words, but it's the same, it's the same shit, different day. Absolutely. We're dealing with the same stuff. And I think that the only change is that because of George Floyd, you have more people who cannot run away from the fact that this is a reality. That is the difference. Because of George Floyd. Because the thing is, there have been enough videos in between with the advent of both social media and the cell phone. There has been enough, or the camera on the cell phone. There has been enough videos of Black men, in particular, in this country, dying on camera, and no one cared. Literally, COVID made these motherfuckers listen. They had to pay attention. They had to. And it was 8 minutes. That was the other thing. The length of time in which these people truly did not listen to them. I think Americans in general tend to be acclimatized to violence, especially when it's quick, like a gunshot. We as a country, and that's not even Black people, as a country, we are traumatized by guns. We just are like, oh, somebody was shot. Oh, well, okay. But to see somebody actively put their neck or put their knee on someone's neck for 8 whole minutes without letting up, for that person to be able to breathe, that was a special type of hate. And again, there was just a rapt audience. But to your point, no, I don't think that there is anything different. But are millennials on you?
I found out I was a millennial, but like an older millennial, like
Yeah.
What are the dates again? But one thing I will say that's different, Melissa, is that we're not staying at jobs for 20 years anymore. Right. So that is a major difference. So once we have that hint of racism, people starting their own business, right? Like people are out. So we're not giving jobs the length of time to do the emotional abuse that happened over decades, right? That's just not happening anymore. So that's what I would say is the major distinction.
Exactly, to Danelle's point. My mom stayed at a job for 30 years, and there are times where that racism got to her, and she come home angry, and there are times, I love my mom to death, but I'm like, why are you angry at me, Mom? You came in the house angry, and I knew it was because of racism. I thought when I get older, I'm not going to have that. I don't want to bring that anger and trauma back to my home, and so I was like, entrepreneurship is for me, because while things, you're right, a lot of things have not changed. The trauma from racism and the pay. There's no equitable pay. Some in some jobs, there are some people making the same, money that their parents made, the same per hour job. That's a problem. And it's like, what, 20, 30 years later? And there are still states fighting over the $15 minimum wage, So, some things are still the same, sadly. So again, entrepreneurship and finding out where Black excellence is real. Find out where your gifts are, research, build a community around that, and find out how you can, forget racism and say, nope, not in my job, because I'm going to monetize myself.
Right. Any other thoughts on that one?
I think I did want to jump in on that. I think that also, so when we talk about, this generation compared to other generations, I think that, just as Didi said, for my parents, they've been at the same place for maybe 30, 40 years. And that was the nature of things. But I think that as we begin to slightly increase and gain more access and opportunity to these corporate arenas, that we have to look at those other Black folks that are sitting in those positions and say to them, listen, you can't not just be the gatekeeper, but you need to come and kick some doors down so some other people can get some jobs up in here, right? Because, Coca-Cola, I'm not even going to get on them right now, but when reparations come, I want my check from Coca-Cola too. Haiti better be calling on Citibank to get their check from them as well. France, give up your check as well. So I think that when we look at these generational things, that yes, things may have changed on surface. But I know Andrew Yang, who's also a presidential candidate, also said, I think it was like 20, is it by 2053? I have to look at the date again, but the net worth of African Americans, Black people, will be at zero. So, as much as we think things are changing with technology, and with the way things are advancing, and with people getting put in these positions, they're still outpacing us by leaps and bounds. Why are they outpacing us? Because yes, they say, we want to hear your voices. We want to bring a couple brands and different things on board. Miss me with all that. Put some policies in place, cut the check, and then let's have a conversation.
Right. And the game is so rigged where our people, to Dee Dee's point about the entrepreneurship, young people are entrepreneurial. I mean, from the gate, young people are entrepreneurial. Yeah. And you got young people doing some incredible things on social media, putting these videos out, making this comedy, doing all kinds of stuff. And what's happening? Because they don't have the access, because they don't have the tools, because of systemic racism, they are being exploited, right? Their stuff is being commodified, and they can't even profit off of their own content. And they don't have the tools to go to court. They don't have the money to go to court. Right. And that just goes back. The game is just completely rigged. So yeah, we're definitely dealing with it. It just looks different. Like some of the elders talk about Jim Crow. I've heard them say James Crow, Esquire. That's how it looks now. So it's just, to quote Ving Rhames in Baby Boy, this ain't nothing new to me. It's just a rerun. All this is a rerun. That's all it is.
So, Rand, I have a question for you, because I know that you dive into this area, and I'm a history buff too. So, here's a question that I just thought about. Right. So, in the workplace, as Black people, were we better off in segregation, or are we better off in integration in terms of business, enterprise, and in the workplace?
You want my real answer?
Of course I do. That's why I brought you here today.
Oh boy! All right, I'm gonna make some folks mad, but that's all right. I do believe that there was something that we lost when we integrated. There was something that we absolutely lost when we integrated. There was, let me say this here, two things. One, there was a sense of community that we had because we had no one else but us, right? You had in the same block an attorney, and maybe his next door neighbor was the trash man. Now, maybe the trash man didn't have the degrees that the attorney had, but the trash man read, the trash man was learned. He had some culture. He understood things, but yet and still he had a network. Thank you. He had a network because his next door neighbor was an attorney. So if something went down, they could connect on that level, right? And now that isn't necessarily the case, right? When folks could move into different areas. I mean, quite naturally, you want to get a nicer house. You want to live in a nicer area. I'm not going to fault any Black person for that, or anybody for that matter, but you lose something there. And then also integration wasn't really integration. It was just assimilation. It was like, we'll let you Black people into our world. And so therefore you play by our rules, and then you can do what you want to do. For me, my dream would be for Black people, not necessarily to segregate like we have to do it, but for us to just be like, you know what, we gonna do us. I'm a big sports guy. I love football. I love basketball. I'm waiting for the day when Black players and retired Black players are just like, yo, we gonna start our own league, and we gonna do this, and everybody's gonna come, and it won't happen. I know it won't. It's just a dream, but I think that there's something to be had when we come together. And look at it this way. I know we lost something. Every town you go into in America, what do they have? They got a Chinatown.
True.
They got a Chinatown. You can go there. You can get all the Chinese foods. You can enjoy the culture, everything like that. No one has a problem with Chinatown. There, if you go in any,
they own their building.
They own if you go into other cities, you might hear of the Germantown. I live in Jersey. I'm like 20 minutes from Philadelphia. South Philly is still home for the Italian community. There's still the Polish areas and things like that. Black people try to get together. It's like, no, y'all can't get together. We can't have a Black town. There's no way. We can't have Africa town. There's no reason for that. No way we can do that. There's something that we lost. There was the power that we had.
I think we do. One thing I think we do need to stop doing is I think we are so open still, like as a community about what we're trying to do, I think we need to stop communicating outside of ourselves. Like there are things that we do that I think are vestiges of internalized racism and a desire to be accepted as a community that I think we need to stop doing. And I think that like one of those things is this need to kind of be like, to telegraph our moves. Like, we don't need to like, one thing that like, I've had really big year this year in terms of like, you know, producing my first feature film. But I had also a lot of lessons that I needed to learn that they were always there, but I wasn't really listening. And what happens is you'll keep getting the same lesson louder and louder with whatever you need to learn being more and more painful, right? And so what happened was like it was something that was like really painful that happened and it basically stemmed from me communicating to like the wrong people about what was going on in my business. I was thinking somebody was a mentor when they weren't. And I say this to say that and then it got shared. But I say this to say that sometimes in order to kind of feel secure in our idea or ideas, we go outside of ourselves to seek that affirmation instead of just being like, all right, I think this is a strong idea. Let me continue to work on it and let me find my co-conspirators, those who can really help me add value and move forward. And I think as Black people, that's really what I want to see. Like Clubhouse, everybody's over there talking about, we need to do our own Black Clubhouse on Clubhouse. You don't think they hear that? You don't think they like, I'm like, stop it.
Right. That's a fact though. That's a fact.
Like Clubhouse gives you the opportunity to like DM some people on Twitter or Instagram. DM somebody, be like, yo, I really like that idea you was talking about, what you really trying to do. And keep it moving. And to actually Kalia's earlier point about like us, like how we should be educating. One thing I've moved away from is trying to educate anybody. I'm just gonna like, I really do believe in the Beyonce lyric, the best revenge is your paper. If you don't want to invest in me, if you don't want to invest in people like me, that is perfectly fine. That allows me to make money in peace. And then when I make more money than you, then you'll come around. Then you'll see diversity is necessary. All is one with the world. Like, but until that point, I'm gonna just go over here and make these moves because I fundamentally believe, unfortunately, that as much as I enjoy people, I also understand that people don't really move unless they feel like they are, or they don't really take risk unless they feel like it benefits them. And so me making money and showing that having diverse teams and having diverse content and really reaching out to audiences that are starved for content is going to show you that this is an investment that should be long-term for your bottom line. Like, that's just how I move these days. I don't choose to teach you anymore. I choose to show you by my winning.
I thank God for civil rights because it's again, powerful changes, policies came out of that. Thankful for our ancestors and leaders that were part of the movement to where we are right now. And yes, integration when it first was rolled out after civil rights, in many ways was good, but it was short-lived and it was superficial. My take on it right now is that, you know, because it was so short-lived, the idea and just coming together, I'll just say it. Segregation, I think, never has ended. When we look at economically, you know, we're still making less on a dollar. When we look at home ownership, I think it's less than 10% of Black community owns a home. When we look at education, when we look at how we're treated by law enforcement, we're always segregated daily. Mentally, we're segregated. You know, when we go into white rooms, we see all the looks and the stares. when even healthcare, I'm not, my husband, he loves football, so forgive me, he's at work right now, but there were 2 football players that just came out and found out, that, their claims were denied because they had CTE, the concussion from football, I believe. And if I'm saying it wrong, please correct me in chat. But their claims were denied because of their race. This is 2021. 2 football players, one from Pittsburgh and I think the other one, that played football, came out of, his circumstances, wherever they were, and made a living for his family. And then when football really hurt him physically, they said, because of race was a determinant, your claim is denied. So I think in so many ways, healthcare, law enforcement, economy, education, we're still segregated. It's just not called segregation.
Donnell, you want to jump in on that one before I go to the next one?
I was just gonna say that book, Black Teachers on Teaching, Black Teachers on Teaching by Michelle Foster. I'm in grad school currently, and we had to read that book. And let me tell you, it's just, I felt Rand. I felt Rand in terms of like what segregation was, and that's basically what the book was that I got out of the book. It's like when you have Black teachers, and I've had very few, but I've had Black teachers that really embrace me in ways that I've never had a white teacher embrace me, in terms of pouring into me educationally, but also emotionally, because they knew I needed both, right? They didn't say, I don't really know you, I'm just going to pour into you, educate, because that's not enough, right? I need to first know that you care in order to absorb the information that you're giving me. And so I just feel like when we think about segregation, when we think about integration, we need to think about what that brings to our children, and really start to we're brainwashed a bit, right? So we're looking to buy a home. My husband and I recently bought a home. To buy a home, we're looking at the great schools rating, right? We're looking at the great school ratings, but all of that is right. So now your school district has a 4. Okay, then you start to comb through it. Oh, it's a Title I school district, so automatically it's a worse off school district, right? So it's just like, but that's not the case. You start digging. There are teachers that are pouring into these kids. These kids are learning, but we're not even taking that extra step to educate ourselves, because we too, in some ways, have conformed. I'll speak to myself. I too have in some ways conformed to the narrative that if my kids go to a 10 school versus a 5 school, then my kids are getting a better education. And that is a false narrative.
That's absolutely it. That's so true. Yeah. Just because it's an all Black school, just because Black children go there, just because Black teachers teach there, the narrative is such. I'll say this here. I live in New Jersey, born, raised Jersey. If you look at the standardized testing, take apart the fact that we already know that it's racist. If you look at these standardized test scores, you will find for every grade, for every test, for every year, Black children constantly are at the bottom. No matter what school district, no matter where they are, what they do, where they go. The narrative is that we can't. The narrative is that our teachers don't. Black teachers don't. And to Donnell's point, there's something that Black kids get from Black teachers that they're not getting anywhere else. The statistics bear out. Black children who've had at least one Black teacher are more likely to graduate from college. They're more likely to graduate from high school. They're less likely to be suspended. They're less likely to be arrested in school. Black teachers are important. If you look at Brown versus the Board of Education, when that whole thing went down, if you look at the transcripts, Linda Brown, her mother, they didn't want to get her out of the school because they didn't like the school. They just wanted to go to the school where the white kids went because it was closer to home. That was it. It wasn't the black school was bad. It was just that it was close to home. And there's this narrative that, Black schools aren't good because the opinion said that they weren't good, that is detrimental for Black kids to not go to white schools. When in reality, because our kids lost something. They lost something when they went to those white schools. And they have something, even if the school district looks like, this school isn't good, this school is crap, this school's not great. You don't know what those Black teachers are pouring into those Black kids that they would not get at a suburban district, that they wouldn't get at a private school. And so, we can't believe the hype. You can't believe the hype. Just because it's Black don't mean that it's bad.
I'd like to say something to that because I think that Donnell really pointed on something. My mother worked for the Newark Board of Education for years, so I'm a bit of a education wonk on the low. And one thing that I remember, my parents put me in a private school in Newark, New Jersey, when I was growing up. And to this day, I remember how those teachers made me feel. They made me feel so special and so extraordinary. And they helped add to a narrative that I was already getting at home, which was you were smart and you were intelligent. So by the time I was 10, I grew up in Newark, New Jersey, but had the confidence of somebody moving through the world like, oh, I can do anything I want. Every teacher I've had until the 5th grade has told me so. So when I moved to, an all-white neighborhood, I was in all the classes with all the smart kids because at that point, that's all I knew was being reinforced that I was intelligent. Now, one thing that I talked to this with a friend who also went with me to Columbia, and we talk about the fact that if you look right now at people who are actively changing the political and social landscape in America, a lot of them aren't coming from our Ivy League institutions. A lot of them are coming from our Hampton.
Say it.
HBCU.
Say it.
Lincoln University, Lincoln.
Yeah, Delaware State University. We're gonna throw all of them.
Right.
And the funny thing is, even if because I'm Nigerian American, obviously, and or not obviously, if y'all didn't know, that's a reality. But I always talk about how having a mother who grew up in a Black country and then being able to go back to a Black country where, again, my intelligence and or beauty or whatever else is just consistently reaffirmed has made me move in the world where I can accomplish and can and should accomplish anything. But when I look alongside me, most of the people, especially those who are coming from the African American community, they went to somebody's HBCU. Like Toni Morrison, who is by far my favorite, both intellectual thinker and one of my favorite authors, and probably one of the best authors of the 20th century. She went to HBCU, and everybody likes to forget.
Our vice president, first female Black vice president. Thanks,
Howard. Is an AKA. These things matter. These things matter. Even when we talk about Nigerians, there's a reason why Nigerians are able to kind of move through so successfully, and a lot of that everybody likes to think it's, oh, we're so bullish. Yes, but we're coming from a place where we were at in our early years, our intelligence and our ability to move forward in the world was reaffirmed somewhere. So when we already got to America, England, wherever else, we already believed enough in ourselves that we were going to move through regardless. And that starts from an early age. So I think that I fundamentally think however I need to get my future babies into somebody's Black classroom, I will do it. If I have to homeschool, I will do that too. I'll be out here with some Jadens and Willows because they look young. They are young, Black, and free. You can tell they're free. They're just out here.
Right. And so I want to real quick before we get to the next question. I just really want to give a little bit of pushback, and not even pushback, but really just talk about segregation without going too deep down, down the rabbit hole. But I think it's my firm belief that yes, we were thriving to an extent when we were segregated, but I also believe that one thing that we never really looked for or really pushed for was power and policy. And so that's why when we talk about, when we're segregated, so when we talk about Black Wall Street, we talk about Tulsa, Oklahoma, when we talk about, I can't think of the town in North Carolina that's now under,
Wilmington.
Is it Wilmington? That's it's a river, or it's a lake. It's buried under a lake now. It's because we never really pushed for that power. And when we did, we would see individuals that were racist, right? that racism that comes into play come into these places, right? Take over the political systems and really push people out for their own agenda. So do I, really believe that we need to be segregated to be successful? No, I don't believe that we need to be segregated to be successful, because I also believe in one thing in genetics as well. And if we know anything about Black people, right, Black people are going to survive no matter what happens to us, right? And so it's not really our concern about whether we need to be acclimated or segregated. It's other people's concern whether they need to get on board with what's going to happen 20 to 30 to 40 to 50 years down the line. Because I think it's within 5 years or 6 years from now, genetically, there will be no more redheads being born in this country. And so do we really need to be segregated? No, I think we are we are a human race, right? And if there's something else that comes along, then we'll have to band together. But we are a human race. But I think that it's just we need to begin to push for that power and policy, and begin to get those races out of a structure that doesn't want to see us win.
I agree, Duncan, but I would push back a little bit and say that I think I agree with you, but what I'm trying to communicate is that we have to also recognize what we lost in integrating, right? And so what happened to the Black teachers during integration? They got fired. They hired white teachers.
Yes,
and so now the narrative is we can't find Black teachers. Oh, we can't, because the pipeline was killed off during integration. That was the pipeline. We killed it. And so, yes, fundamentally, we need integration. We need each other. We talked about co-conspirators, right? Co-conspirators could be anyone. But in terms of education, I think we have to recognize through the process of integration what we lost, so that we understand when people say, I can't find Black male teachers. Oh, we know why. We know why. Yeah. And there's history there to reinforce that.
To Amanda Gorman's poem, which is so beautiful and earth-shattering, it's America, it's unfinished. Integration is just unfinished.
Right.
We started in civil rights. We just got to finish it the right way, through policy, economic power.
That's right.
So I want to jump in really quick, and I want to just preface that we're going to have two more questions, and then we're going to move towards ending the show. We definitely have great dialogue, but we want to be respectful of everyone's time that came on today as a panelist. So I want to jump into this, Duncan, with Mr. Brian Evans' question from the comments as one of the two questions that we're going to end with, right? How do you feel about Blacks who play the corporate game to establish success, but then use that success to affect change? Are they sellouts or are they heroes?
When he says affect change, what does he mean?
I think maybe like coming back. Maybe I don't know him like that, but maybe he says coming back to the neighborhood, making change from the knowledge that he's gained from corporate America. But I'm thinking that's what he's saying, but I'm not sure. If Brian can clarify that, that'll be amazing. But anyone can jump in. What do you think about this question?
Well, that's why research is so important, because right now that was, I believe, an 80s, 90s narrative, sellouts. A majority of Black people have left corporate for entrepreneurship, for education, for other avenues, for other streams of income, entertainment. So many of us left corporate. We saw
there is a mass exodus in corporate. I think Black people really got tired. We was like, you know what? I could at least make what I made in corporate by myself. Maybe it's harder work, but when you can control your hours, and when you can, and thereby controlling your peace and who you engage with and how, that changes the game. I have corporate people hit me up all the time, and I'm just like, you ain't got nobody of color. You just want me to be again.
I'm still in corporate. So I mean, look, at the end of the day, I think what Duncan said earlier in terms of making sure that you are actually impacting, Melissa said this too, impacting policies, that it won't take that next person that's under you or behind you or whatever 20 years to get to SVP level. What are you doing to call it out so that because it's the whole seniority piece. Like, oh, I woke up at 5 a.m. and got into the office, so you should wake up at 5 a.m. Right? Like, I stayed 13-hour days, so you should stay. I waited 25 years. Why should they have to do that? And so making sure that you're at the table, right? Like, to call these things out that we talk about in private, but we don't really get the opportunity to bring those things to the table. It's just to really call them out on it, because I think you're right, Justin. People aren't using the word sellouts anymore. But there's this toxicity that's happening amongst Black and brown people within corporate America, and we talked about it earlier. It's like this. There's only one seat, so I can't help you. Right. It is.
Right.
It is heavy.
Throw them bows, right?
Yeah. You just. So the higher you get, right, the more competitive you get, the more you feel like, there's only this one seat, and so you're not looking back. You're not saying let's work together on this. You're not saying let's just pull up another chair, right? You don't even think that's an option, because in your mind there was only one. And so I think we have to challenge each other and really call each other out, not in front of people, but pull each other to the side. We'll have to do this, right? So I think that's equally important.
I agree with you. All right. Well, Rand, anyone else? Rand, Dee, anything else on this before I move to my last question?
Again, I am data driven. My field calls for that. Plus, I'm a lifelong learner. And when I saw the trend 5 years ago of many Black people leaving corporate because of the reasons we just talked about for the last 2 hours, and instead of a seat, and I love the book, Getting Your Seat at the Table. I'm LinkedIn friends with the author, and I love what she has to say. But many Black people now are saying, I don't want a seat. I want my own table.
Right.
And I look at Rosewood, and I look at other, Black entrepreneurial, ventures throughout history, and how they fed generations. So for me, I don't want to go back to corporate unless I'm leading it with anti-racism and changing the culture. If I'm not changing the culture, then I'm not ever going back to corporate.
I would just say for me, I've never worked in corporate, so I would defer to everyone else here who has. But I would just say this for me. It's just about whatever you're doing. Are you doing it for the people? Or are you doing it for some sort of other ulterior motive? And if you're doing it for the people, I think that there are different ways that you can go about it. You don't have to go in corporate. I think that there are folks who do it for people and are in corporate circles, and I think that's fine. I've heard and seen about the corporate exodus as well. But I think that whatever it is that you do, you have to do it for people if that's your aim. Now, if your aim is something else, well, I can't speak to it. But again, I would say whatever you do, if you care about Black people, if you love Black people, wherever you are, you should keep that at the forefront if that's what you're trying to do. Now, again, if you have another motive, God bless you. But if it's about the people, then you have to do what's best in whatever place you're in.
Mm-hmm. All right. So this is the last question before we close it out. But I think this is the best question to close it out with. So just think about if you had a pen and a paper, you're able to write a letter to corporate America. So if you could write an open letter to corporate America, what are some of the major things that you would say?
Fire racist, hire anti-racist. Send.
There it is.
Cool. I like that. I like that.
You're gonna just put that in the subject line.
Right.
CC everybody.
Right. Save you some time. Good one, Dee. What about everyone else? If you had an open letter to corporate America, what's some things you would say?
I would say that first I would say I need a raise, period. Then I would say that
cut the check.
DE&I is not the answer without capacity, without resources. So there is this whole wave of corporate entities hiring director equity inclusion, and I think it's wonderful. I think it's long overdue. but I also fear that they believe that their work is done. And I fear that that person that has been hired is not given the capacity, is not given the resources to be successful. And so we can't just say in word and deed like what we want, but they have to back it up through resources. And so that's what I would say. I think that's like top of mind for me in terms of what corporate America should be doing. And I understand and we appreciate your policy statements and your anti-racism statements and your newfound love for equality and equity in the workplace. Appreciate it. Long overdue, but back that up with resources.
All right. Anyone else?
I mean, I would probably say pay back all the money you stole.
There you go.
You know, simple as that.
Right.
Simple as that. All right. Listen.
I've said a lot, and this is actually the question I don't really know how I would answer. Like, I just feel like I would have such a long worded email,
Right.
and I would have bullet points and sub points, like. But I guess the goal of my conversation, I think people underestimate how much time and energy work takes. Even in COVID, I have been surprised and consistently disappointed at how, and this isn't even about race, this is just how corporate America has dealt with taking care of the people that are adding to their bottom lines, like giving them real time and space, like creating opportunities for communal just breaths. So in doing so, and as it relates to my own reality as a Black woman and what I've felt has happened while I was in corporate America, being really frank about the taxing nature of work and the taxing nature of work in capitalistic societies and structures, because there's a lot of pressure that is put on making hitting deadlines, hitting goals, and like being able to generate revenue over a long period of time for the company, right? And that comes with a lot of, whether you're Black, white, Puerto Rican, Haitian, whatever, it comes with a lot of backstabbing. It comes with a lot of distrust. It comes with a lot of just lack of community oftentimes, as people are trying to compete to get more resources for their own families, selves, whatever. But on top of that, the microaggressions one has to deal with in the office because of being believed to be inferior, like in and of it, and like how one has to navigate that as a Black person on top of just the regular stuff. Really putting in place, if you're doing this DE&I work, really putting in place structures and opportunities that allow the people, the minorities within your company, to be able to freely express the frustrations they may have in kind of dealing with engaging those things on a day-to-day basis. That's probably what I would talk about most, because I would expect Donnell, Dee Dee, and Rand to write more effective and succinct letters than I did. So I will just talk about, please don't have me come to your office and not be paying me and not pay for some type of mental health expert on site. Because if not, then we're going to need HR in a lot of these conversations.
Yes.
Don't minimize that, Melissa, because they need that raw. They need that raw. Somebody got to give it to them. So don't minimize it.
Yeah.
But I'm tired. It's always me.
Yeah.
I can see your letter now, Melissa. And P.S. All of y'all can kiss my, leave it there.
Drop the mic and everything. I'm out of here. Interesting. All right. So we're at the tail end of the conversation. It's been a blast, but we got to end out properly these last two questions here, right? Small questions. So, panelists, for anyone who maybe just tuned in right now who missed this conversation, just tuned in, what's the biggest takeaway for our listeners today? What should they leave here with this conversation?
If you're not Black and you want to change the world through anti-racism, listen to Black people. It's Black History Month. Don't explain our pain away. Don't say you understand and enable the racists at your work. Listen to Black folks. And if you are Black, support each other. You know,
Yes.
Inter-minority racism is let that die out in corporate. You know, I believe entrepreneurship is the future. So, you know, support each other. You know, find each other on social media. You don't have to be rich to start your own business. You hear that all the time with people who have accomplished 7-8 figures. You know, find out what you're excellent at, research it, find your community, and then begin to build and work till you have to work, and then, you know, invest in yourself.
Right.
I would say look for opportunities to be a co-conspirator. Look for opportunities to touch the pole. And if you don't know what I mean by that, you got to go back in the video a little bit. But Dr. Bettina Love explains that away. But yeah, look for opportunities to be that co-conspirator in the workplace, to support your colleagues in a way that's authentic, to be yourself and allow your colleagues to be themselves. So that's what
Is it me or Rand?
Anyone.
And the question again was, what would my for anybody who's coming into the room?
Yes.
What's the takeaway?
Yeah, what the takeaway would be.
Protect your peace in these workspaces. Protect your peace. Don't let anybody tell you who you are and what your value is. That should always be something you know going in, and something you know leaving every single day of that office. That would be my takeaway.
Oh man, y'all took all the good stuff, man. I would just say this, not to get super deep. I'm just a believer, you know. Rest in who you are. Rest in who God made you to be. And don't compromise, don't settle. Racism, unfortunately, is here. This is the social structure, white supremacy. But that doesn't have to consume who you are. And it doesn't have to consume who God made you to be. Whichever God you believe in. You know, rest in the fact that you were made for a purpose. And just because the world and society says that you're not, or that you're ugly, or that you're this, you're that, you're not worthy, it's a lie. It's a lie to keep down your light. And don't let them steal the light from you, so that way you can't give it to other people. Because that's the scheme. They don't want you to give your light to someone else so that others will be lit. They want you to stay dim. So don't live in that space of darkness. Don't let that darkness overcome you. The only darkness that needs to overcome you is your Blackness. And I would just stick with that.
All right. Profound. All right. So last question. So we'll start with Donnell on this one. Where can we find you on social media? Your website, information. So just plug everyone in, right? And so where they can follow the discussion with you off this platform. Where can they find you?
See, this is when I'm not a millennial, right? Like I should be giving you like www.donnellkellyman.com. You can follow me on like honestly, like maybe look me up on LinkedIn, maybe.
Right.
I mean, I am on Instagram, but like I just like these discussions. So on LinkedIn, if you want to have a discussion on video or off video. So that's how I say.
And also for just for Donnell, if you don't know, her husband does awesome photography, so she can do professional headshots. So make sure you check out Kellyman Photography if you can. He does awesome work. So and what's KellymanPhotography.com. So definitely check him out.
Thanks for that, Dunk.
All right, Dee, you next.
Sure. I am on LinkedIn at Dee Lofton Davis. I'm also on Facebook, Dee Lofton Davis, and I have a website, Lofton Davis Consulting. I'm not on Twitter. I'm not on Instagram. There's too many things I have to do in a day. I can't stay on social media all day. So Facebook, LinkedIn, and of course my website, LoftonDavisConsulting.com.
All right. There we go.
Thank you.
All right. Melissa.
You can find me on probably most on Instagram at MISSAADEE01, Miss Adi 01. But you can also find me on LinkedIn as well as my website, www.ominirastudios.com.
All right. Last but not least, Mr. Miller.
All right, bear with me for a second because I wanted to make sure I got everything down so I didn't forget. You can follow me on Twitter at UrbanEdDJ. I'm also on IG at Urban Ed Mixtape. Also, take a look at my blog, Urban Education Mixtape, which is designed for teachers and parents who work or have students that are in urban education settings. Also look at that on YouTube, the Urban Ed Mixtape YouTube page. I'm doing some stuff for Black History Month. Just released a video yesterday, 5 minutes of Black history, doing it every week on Wednesdays. Definitely that. If you're interested in some of my writings, journal portfolio, Rand Miller journal portfolio, and check out my other personal blog, Chocolate Nuisance, on Medium.
There we go. All right. Well, listen, we really appreciate you all coming through. We've been enlightened, and also for the viewers that came through as well. Great insight. Really appreciate your engagement throughout the whole show. Duncan, take us away, man.
Yes, sir. So we just want to say once again, thank you to the panelists. This has been an awesome discussion. Definitely learned a lot. Even learned more about being Black in the workplace and protecting my peace. And then also, telling some people that they can kiss my. I'll save that for another show. Shut your mouth. But please, we also, if you go to www.MercerCountyWorks.com, check out the article Black in the Workplace. If you haven't yet, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button if you're on YouTube, and join us not next Thursday, February 18th at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. For our next show, Are You LinkedIn? The Future of Work and How You Will Get Hired. We're tackling LinkedIn. We're going to let you know the tips, tools, and tricks from some LinkedIn experts on how to utilize LinkedIn, how to get hired, how to build your brand. So we'll see you next time. Peace.